The receipt lay on the table like a quiet insult. $0. No tip. Not even spare change. For Elena Carter, standing in the middle of a crowded late-night diner with aching feet and a forced smile still clinging to her face, that empty line felt heavier than the entire 12-hour shift she had just worked. Plates clattered, the coffee machine hissed, and laughter floated from another booth, but all Elena could see was that number. 0. She swallowed hard, folded the receipt, and slid it into her apron like she always did. Because crying at work wasn't an option. Not when rent was overdue. Not when her 6-year-old son, Noah, was waiting at home with his babysitter. Not when life had already taken more from her than she could afford to lose. She didn't know yet that the man who left that receipt behind, the sharply dressed, silver-haired customer who barely looked at her all evening, had just altered the course of her life forever. Elena hadn't planned to be a waitress at 32. She once dreamed of becoming a nurse. She loved helping people, loved the idea of healing. But dreams cost money, and life had a way of emptying pockets faster than it filled them. Her husband, Mark, had died 3 years earlier in a construction accident. One phone call. One moment. And suddenly Elena was a widow with a toddler, drowning in hospital bills, funeral costs, and a mortgage she could no longer afford. She sold the house. Sold her wedding ring. Took 2 jobs. Still, it was never enough. The diner became her second home, sometimes her first. It was where she smiled through exhaustion, memorized regulars' orders, and learned how to stretch $1 until it screamed. Tips weren't luxuries, they were survival, which was why the man in booth 17 stood out. He arrived just before the dinner rush, alone, wearing a tailored suit that looked more expensive than Elena's car. His watch caught the light every time he moved his hand. Calm. Controlled. Observant. Elena, table 17, her manager called. She grabbed a menu and walked over, straightening her shoulders. Good evening, sir. I'm Elena. I'll be taking care of you tonight. He nodded, polite but distant. Coffee. Black. And I'll have the steak. Medium rare. No small talk. No smile. Just business. As the night went on, Elena noticed him watching everything, the way the staff moved, how customers spoke, how she gently helped an elderly woman into her coat, how she laughed softly when a child spilled juice. She didn't know why, but she felt like she was being measured. When she brought the check, he paid in cash, stood up, and left without a word. That's when she saw the receipt. $0. Her chest tightened. Of course, she whispered to herself. Why would tonight be any different? She wiped the table quickly. Plates stacked. Napkins tossed. Then she froze. Something was taped underneath the plate. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. It wasn't money. It was an envelope. Her name was written on it in careful handwriting. Elena. Her heart pounded as she slipped it into her apron and finished her shift in a daze. At home, Noah was already asleep, his small chest rising and falling under his dinosaur blanket. Elena kissed his forehead, changed out of her uniform, and sat at the kitchen table. The envelope felt heavy in her hands, not in weight, but in possibility. She opened it. Inside was a folded letter, and a key. No explanation. Just a simple brass key and a handwritten note. Elena. Tonight, I watched you serve more than food. I watched kindness, patience, and strength poured into strangers who may never thank you. I once had someone like you in my life. I failed them when it mattered most. This is not a tip. It's a second chance, for both of us. Go to the address on the back tomorrow at noon. R. Her breath caught. On the back was an address. Downtown. A building she recognized from the news. Ravenport Tower. Her hands started to shake. Ravenport. As in Richard Raventon, billionaire investor, philanthropist, and one of the richest men in the country. Her mind raced. This had to be a mistake. A joke. A cruel coincidence. But the key felt real. The letter felt intentional. She barely slept that night. The next day, Elena stood in front of Raventon Tower, her thrift store coat pulled tight around her. The glass building soared into the sky like it belonged to another world, one she was never meant to enter. Security stopped her at the door. I have an appointment, she said, holding out the letter with shaking hands. The guard read it, his expression changing. Go right up, ma'am. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, Richard Raventon himself stood waiting. Up close, he looked older than she expected. Tired. His eyes, though sharp, carried something heavy, regret, maybe. You came, he said softly. I didn't know if I should, Elena admitted. He gestured for her to sit. I left no tip because money alone doesn't test character, he said. I needed to know who you were when no one was watching. Her throat tightened. And you passed, he replied. You didn't complain. You didn't chase me. You simply did your job with dignity. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents. Tuition coverage. Childcare assistance. A living stipend. My wife was a waitress, he said quietly. A single mother. I was too busy building an empire to notice she was drowning. She died believing she wasn't enough. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I can't change that, he continued. But I can change this. He looked at her firmly. I want to sponsor your nursing education. No loans. No debt. And when you're ready, a position at the hospital funded by my foundation. Elena broke down. She cried for the years of struggle. For the nights she skipped meals so Noah could eat. For the invisible kindness that finally had been seen. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. Richard shook his head. Just promise me one thing. What? When you have the chance, do for someone else what you wish someone had done for you. Years later, Elena stood in a hospital hallway wearing scrubs, a stethoscope around her neck. Noah, now older, waited proudly with a handmade sign that read "That's my mom." She never forgot that night. The $0 tip. The envelope. The lesson. Because sometimes, the biggest blessings don't come in obvious forms. Sometimes, they're hidden under a plate. And sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness, done quietly, without expectation, are the very things that change everything. The end.